On August the 4th, 2022, a blood-red Porsche packed with 9 firearms tore through the quiet streets of Lyttelton. Behind the wheel wasn't a gang member or career criminal, but a 63-year-old prominent eye surgeon on his way to cause catastrophic damage. This documentary aims to present an honest and unfiltered account of the case surrounding Dr. Ian Dallison. Dr. Ian Dallison is believed to be born in either 1958 or 1959, as he was documented as being 66 years of age in November 2025. For decades, he was a pillar of the Christchurch medical community, a self-made man who built a successful career specializing in acute ophthalmology. He lived the high life on Fendleton's exclusive Helmores Lane, a street of a wealthy suburb in the city of Christchurch. He owned multiple sports cars, including a Porsche and a Ferrari, and maintained a collection of fine whiskey and cigars. His home was a shrine to his globe-trotting lifestyle, decorated with zebra skin rugs and taxidermy animal heads, trophies from his various shooting safaris. Alongside the trophies, Dallison possessed an arsenal of firepower that would make a cartel kingpin blush, maintaining a secure gunroom filled with a staggering collection of approximately 200 firearms. One acquaintance who was given a private tour described it as unbelievable, noting it included everything from handguns to a fully functional Gatling machine gun. It was a hoard of weaponry that stood in stark contrast to his day job of delicate eye surgery. He moved in the highest circles of power. At the time of the incident, he was in a long-term romantic relationship with a sitting district court judge, Jane Farish. They were a power couple in every sense of the word, but behind the red Porsche and the prestige, the foundation of Dallison's life was silently rotting away. Following the devastating Christchurch earthquakes of 2010 and 2011, his medical practice began to struggle. In a bid to stay afloat, he sold the land his practice sat on to his close friend and commercial landlord, Alberto Seccarelli, leasing the building back to continue his work. It was a deal born out of friendship, but would sadly end in ruin, and by the month of December 2020, Dallison could no longer pay the rent either. He had accrued massive debt, and Seccarelli, left with no other business choice, evicted him. The psychological impact on Dallison was catastrophic. Reports would later identify a well-established pattern in the surgeon's personality. When faced with a financial dispute, he became arrogant, angry, and uncompromising. He didn't just see this as a business failure, he saw it as a betrayal. The timeline of events is a study in cold, hard premeditation. On August 3, 2022, the day before the incident, Dallison opened his laptop and navigated to Google Maps. He didn't just look up the address, he performed a digital reconnaissance. He used satellite view to zoom in on Seccarelli's home in Lyttelton before switching to street view to pan around the property, looking for entry points and layout details. That same evening, his mobile phone pinged off a cell phone tower in the victim's suburb. He was physically scoping out the kill zone. The following day, on August 4, 2022, the walls finally closed in. Just after lunchtime, Dallison stood in the Christchurch High Court and was adjudicated bankrupt, accruing a debt of $247,000, a large portion in unpaid rent to Seccarelli. However, the straw that broke the camel's back wasn't the bankruptcy itself, it was something far more trivial. Later that afternoon, he received an invoice from a taxidermist. It was a bill for his luxury hobby that he simply couldn't pay. Dallison later told the parole board that receiving that invoice was the moment rationality had gone out the window. He felt cornered, humiliated, and stripped of his identity, deciding it was time to confront the man he blamed for his downfall. At approximately 6:45 p.m., Dallison drove his Porsche 911 out of his Fendleton driveway, briefly stopping to buy $40 worth of fuel and a set of batteries for a torch. The batteries weren't for lighting his way, they were for a modified maglite which had been converted into a shotgun. At 7:38 p.m. with their front door unlocked, Alberto Seccarelli, then 75, and his wife Antje Schmidt, 52, were sitting down to dinner. They had no idea that their former friend was standing in their hallway, armed with a loaded Ruger .22 semi-automatic pistol. Dallison didn't announce his presence. He walked to the entrance of the kitchen, raised the Ruger, and fired. The bullet narrowly missed Seccarelli's head, slamming into the doorframe just inches from his face. In that split second, the weapon jammed. It was the only thing that prevented a murder. Dallison later admitted to police that he tried to pull the trigger again, but the mechanism failed. What followed was a desperate, chaotic struggle for survival. The elderly couple rushed the gunman. As they wrestled on the floor, the surgeon used his anatomical knowledge for violence, gouging his finger into Seccarelli's right eye with such force that it caused permanent damage. He then turned his rage on Seccarelli's wife, Antje Schmidt, pinning her to the floorboards before violently bashing her on the back of the head with the butt of the gun. The screams echoing from the house alerted the neighbors who rushed in, and helped restrain Dallison until police arrived. In the immediate aftermath, covered in blood and adrenaline, one of the victims made a frantic phone call, not just to emergency services, but to Dallason's partner, Judge Jane Farish. The physical scars of that night were immediate, but the long-term damage was profound. Alberto Ceccarelli was left with significant vision loss. The eye gouge caused misalignment, double vision, and depth perception issues that stripped him of his ability to drive, read comfortably, or work. He described his life as completely shattered and now lives in a state of permanent anxiety. Antje Schmidt suffered a severe concussion and heavy bleeding from the pistol whipping. She went on to tell the court that the simple act of sitting at her own dinner table now serves as a constant reminder of the night their lives were almost ended by a man they once trusted. The attack also sent shockwaves through the tight-knit Lyttelton community. Dallison wasn't a stranger. He was a known figure, a man of status. The realization that a violent gunman had been prowling their streets, not a random criminal, but a respected surgeon, shattered the community's sense of safety. When police searched Dallason's Porsche, they realized this wasn't just a home invasion. It was a planned execution. Inside the vehicle, officers discovered a mobile armory. Alongside the Ruger and the modified Maglite shotgun, the sports car was packed with a loaded Smith & Wesson revolver, a Sterling handgun, an accelerator pistol, a Derringer, and 2 spy pen guns, one of which was fitted with a silencer, as well as 167 rounds of ammunition. It was a collection that suggested he was prepared for a war, not just a confrontation. The investigation quickly peeled back the layers of Dallason's double life. They found a man who had been hiding behind a facade of wealth while secretly drowning in debt. But the most sensitive aspect of the investigation was his connection to the judiciary. Because of his relationship with Judge Jane Farish, the legal proceedings were handled with extreme caution. Farish herself fought a 13-month legal battle to keep her name suppressed, arguing for privacy. It wasn't until the 11th of June 2024 that the Supreme Court lifted the order, ruling that the public had a right to know that a sitting judge was the partner of the attempted murderer and was personally known to the victims. In the month of December 2022, Ian Dallison stood in the dock and pleaded guilty to attempted murder and wounding with intent to injure. The gentleman surgeon persona was gone, and in his place was now a convicted violent offender. In a twist of irony, the wealth that Dallison had killed to protect was the only thing that allowed him to clean up the financial mess he had created. While sitting in a prison cell, he sold his prestigious luxury home to a property developer for just under $3 million, using the proceeds to pay off the debt, including the rent owed to his victims. Consequently, his bankruptcy was annulled in the High Court. On the 28th of April 2023, Justice Andrew Isaac delivered the sentence. He noted Dallason's entitled attitude and his refusal to accept responsibility for his own financial failures, with the judge sentencing the eye surgeon to 6 years and 10 months in prison. Dallison also voluntarily surrendered his medical practicing certificate, ending his career in disgrace. The sentencing was supposed to be the end of the story, but for the victims, the legal battle was far from over. In November 2024, Dallison appeared for his first parole hearing. He told the board he had something to live for and confirmed he was still in a relationship with Judge Farish. The board declined his release, ruling that he remained an undue risk to the community due to his potential for extreme violent responses to stressful situations. 6 months later, in May 2025, the tide turned. The parole board ruled that Dallason's risk could now be managed. He was granted parole with a strict release date in early June 2025. The conditions were clear. He was to be released to an address in Marlborough, far away from his victims, and was banned from entering the Canterbury region without written approval. But Dallison wasn't content with exile. By October 2025, just months after his release, he was back before the board asking to return to Canterbury. He claimed he was lonely, that his support network, including Judge Farish, was 5 hours away, and that the distance was hindering his reintegration. This request led to a tense showdown on the 25th of November 2025. During the hearing, Dallison made comments that the board interpreted as a veiled threat. He told the panel that if they didn't let him move back now, he would simply wait until his sentence ended in 3 years and move back anyway, stating, "I will be going into Christchurch if need be." He further implied that if he was kept in Marlborough, he would start submitting frequent requests to visit Canterbury for family functions, noting, "The victims will be getting hassled about me wanting to go down there." Panel convener Mary Moore immediately shut him down with a warning. "Be careful, Mr. Dallison. It sounds like you're threatening the victims with consequences if this application isn't granted." Dallison backpedaled, claiming it wasn't a threat, but a coincidence. However, the damage was done, and the board adjourned the hearing until December 22, 2025, leaving the surgeon in limbo and the victims in a continued state of uncertainty. The case of Ian Dallison exposes the fragile veneer of upper-class high society. It is a story of how quickly respectability can crumble when the money runs out. Dallison was a man who defined himself by his possessions, his sports cars, his gun collection, his beautiful Helmores Lane home. When those were threatened, he didn't live within his means. Instead, he picked up a gun. He remains on parole in Marlborough, a man stripped of his title, his practice, and his mansion, but still fighting for the control he lost that night in Lyttelton. For the victims, the physical wounds may have healed, but the sight of a sports car or a simple sit-down dinner will likely always carry a phantom weight. What are your thoughts on the sentencing for the surgeon? Was the length of time given appropriate for the crime? If the average person were caught with 9 firearms and a kill list, let alone an attempted murder charge, would they too also be out on parole in only 2 years? Share your perspectives in the comments below. If you found this documentary informative, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more in-depth explorations of often overlooked, lesser-known stories. Who else would you like to see us detail next? Your engagement helps us continue to shed light on otherwise unheard narratives.